So, sorry. I'm now reading off of the AP U.S. History Course Guidebook. I have linked. I'm starting on PDF page 44. So I'm going to read the key concepts. If you know these concepts well, you're going to be good for the test. Each concept I read will be corresponding to whatever kind of question they're going to ask you. The key difference here is that you need to make sure you have examples, like detail, which is one of the reasons why you want to read the Princeton Review book as well. Okay. So I'm starting with topic 1.1. The learning objective is explain the context for European encounters from 1491 to 1607. Key concept 1.1. As native populations migrated and settled across the vast expanse of North America over the time, they developed distinct and increasingly complex societies by adapting to and transforming their diverse environments. All right, so I'm going to go down the key concepts list here. I'm not going to name each one because it's going to take forever. So the next one says, different native societies adapted to and transformed their environments through innovations in agriculture, resource use, and social structure. The mound builders like the Mississippians, the Pueblos made those, the Pueblo Indians made those adobes, those buildings in the Southwest. The Plains Native Americans used the buffalo, like the Sioux. They used the buffalo in their hides, and they were nomadic, so just whatever it took to survive in their environments. Down. All right. Contact among Europeans, Native Americans, and Africans resulted in the Columbian Exchange and significant social, cultural, and political changes on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean. So again, it's very important to understand the Columbian Exchange as much as you can, because that's like you're going to have to know some examples from that because it just shows up all the time. Let me go through and give you some examples for the Columbian Exchange real quick. So from the New World to the Old World, so meaning from the Americas to Europe, you have tobacco, pumpkins, quinine, turkey, squash, sweet potatoes, avocados, pineapple, peppers, cocoa beans, peanuts, potatoes, tomatoes, corn, beans, and vanilla all going to the Old World. From Old World to the New World, meaning from Europe to the Americas, coffee, peach, pears, citrus fruit, olives, bananas, honeybee, sugarcane, onions, cattle, sheep, pigs, horses, wheat, rice, barley, oats, grapes, turnips, all kinds of diseases like smallpox, influenza, typhus, measles, malaria, and so on. So, biggest impact for both sides to be aware of in general is that you have the foods that go to Europe help increase their populations, like corn and potatoes especially. When they have increased populations over the next several decades, they'll have a lack of land for places to stay, so a lot of them end up coming to the Americas for colonization in the 1600s. The biggest impact, of course, on the Americas is the diseases that helps wipe out somewhere up to 50 million people, basically, just by showing up and arriving and bringing these diseases with them. So here are the sub-concepts. European expansion into the Western Hemisphere generated intense social, religious, political, and economic competition and changes within European societies. Meaning you're going to have a lot of Christian persecution. They're going to come here and try to convert these guys and force them to become Christian. If they don't, they might kill them. That's one aspect of that. There's economic competition. The Europeans try to come over here and try to get land for either making plantations for sugarcane, gold and silver, whatever the case is, and so on. The Columbian Exchange and development of the Spanish Empire in the Western Hemisphere resulted in intense demographic, economic, and social changes. Just be aware that it helped to establish these plantations and miners. They used the encomienda system to help get all this stuff out of the Americas. It also led to mixture of cultures. You had like the Europeans who led the colonies, but you also had mixed race people, kind of the middle chain of society, who could actually own some property as well. In their interactions, Europeans and Native Americans asserted divergent worldviews regarding issues such as religion, gender roles, family, and land use and power. So, anyway, the Native Americans saw religion as, something of the world, like in touch with earth and God, and there were many gods. whereas the Europeans were mostly Christian in terms of their religion in general. The Europeans believed in very strict gender roles as far as what the male did. They brought over mostly men in general to the colonies from Europe. Native Americans didn't believe in land ownership or land owning, essentially, whereas Europeans believed you could own land and control the land. That was a big conflict as well, too. All right, so let's go down and see what else we got here. Key concept 1.1a, the spread of maize cultivation from present-day Mexico northward into present-day American Southwest and beyond supported economic development, settlement, advanced irrigation, and social diversification among societies. Societies responded to the aridity of the Great Basin and the grasslands of the Western Plains by developing largely mobile lifestyles. So like the Plains, Native Americans were mostly nomadic, like the Sioux, the Cheyenne types. In the Northeast, the Mississippi River Valley, and along the Atlantic seaboard, some societies developed mixed agriculture and hunter-gatherer economies that favored the development of permanent villages. So the Mississippian Native Americans were an example of that. The mound builders. You have the Iroquois up in the New York area. Those are all examples of permanent villages. Societies in the Northwest and present-day California supported themselves by hunting and gathering, and in some areas developed settled communities supported by the vast resources of the ocean. That, again, goes back to the Pueblo people. Okay, let's see what else we got here. European nations' efforts to explore and conquer the New World stem from a search for new sources of wealth, economic and military competition, and a desire for spread of Christianity. So that's the main idea. You want to be aware of that. They're looking for wealth, gold, silver, or plantation crops. They're competing against other Europeans and using military power like the conquistadors to conquer these areas. And they had a desire to spread Christianity to these areas as well. Okay, the Columbian Exchange brought new crops to Europe from the Americas, stimulating European population growth and new sources of mineral wealth, which facilitated the European shift from feudalism to capitalism. Improvements in maritime technology and more organized methods for conducting international trade, such as joint stock companies, helped drive changes to the economies in Europe and the Americas. So that's a very good point. New methods like compass development and better ships like the Caravel, the Sextant, all kinds of technology helped them to get across the ocean, better ships. But also things like joint stock companies. Not one person could afford to send a ship over by itself, so you would have these joint stock companies that would send over all kinds of, would gather together some people's monies into one big group to help fund these expeditions. Like the Virginia Company is going to eventually fund Jamestown. Spanish exploration and conquest of the Americas was accompanied and furthered by widespread deadly epidemics that devastated native populations and by the introduction of crops and animals not found in the Americas. We've pretty much covered all that. All right, moving on to KC 1.22b. In the encomienda system, Spanish colonial economies marshaled Native American labor to support plantation-based agriculture and extract precious metals and other resources. So they use the encomienda system for mines as well as for gold and silver, as well as plantation for things like sugar. European traders partnered with some West African groups who practiced slavery to forcibly extract slave labor for the Americas. The Spanish imported enslaved Africans to labor in the plantations and for agriculture and mining. So when Native Americans began to die off and needed more laborers, they began to bring over Africans to replace the dying Native Americans. Using Africans is not the same thing as the encomienda system. This was them using the African slave trade instead. So it's not the same thing as the slave trade system. The Spanish developed a caste system that incorporated and carefully defined the status of the diverse population of Europeans, Africans, and Native Americans in their empire. So at the top, you had people born in Europe. In the middle, you had the mixed races. At the bottom, you had Native Americans, and then blacks and black slaves at the very bottom of their caste system. It was very rigid. You cannot change classes. Wherever you're born into is where you stayed in their very strict system. The reason why they bring this up is because you want to be aware of how strict their caste system is in comparison with the English colonies that will eventually develop, where there is no intermixing, there is no interrace relations. So they're much more accepting of interrace relations in the Spanish colonies, as well as the French and eventual Dutch colonies. but the English never mix with the races. It's always basically just pure white. And so Africans as well as Native Americans are always seen as less than because they're kept separate. Okay. In their interactions, Europeans and Native Americans asserted divergent worldviews regarding issues such as religion, gender roles, family, land use, and power. So I'll read the sub-details here. Mutual misunderstandings between Europeans and Native Americans often defined the early years of interaction and trade as each group sought to make sense of the other. Over time, Europeans and Native Americans adopted some useful aspects of each other's culture. Europeans could adopt the way they dressed or some of the ways they hunted and gathered food and kept food. And of course, Native Americans could adopt it like better technology or weapons or whatever. As European encroachments on Native Americans' lands and demands on their labor increased, Native peoples sought to defend and maintain their political sovereignty, economic prosperity, religious beliefs, and concepts of gender relations through diplomatic negotiations and military resistance. Extended contact with Native Americans and Africans fostered a debate among European religious and political leaders about how non-Europeans should be treated, as well as evolving religious, cultural, and racial justifications for the subjugation of Africans and Native Americans. Meaning that, there was debates like with Bartolome de las Casas, who criticized how Native Americans were treated. And you also have people like Juan de Sepulveda said that since they were savages, you can treat them harshly. We talked about all these guys back in Unit 1 a very long time ago. But there's a lot of debate and talk about how these guys should be treated. But for the most part, even though they had things like the in-commune system to try to make sure they were being treated well, it was never really followed well. And these guys got brutally treated and killed and overworked and so forth. Okay. Looks like the same thing. Yeah, okay. I think we're good. So, again, the everything I just read are the key concepts. The more you read through them and the more you go back and look at old material, the better. Go look at crash course videos to help supplement this. You should have plenty of time to look these over, and you should be in good shape. But we'll pick up with Unit 2 with like Jamestown and all that tomorrow and on Tuesday and move forward. So